My name is Dustin Wheeler, and my family calls me Duck Tuck. My love of wine created the Duck Vine. The joy and passion I have for wine is a bottle of knowledge I want to share with you. Let me be your favorite certified sommelier and pour you a big glass of edutainment, so you can sit back, swirl it, sniff it, and sip it as we ducks fly together through the wine world. Let's duck and go! Hello, all of my wine friends. It is that time of the year. It is July. It is about to be the 4th of July here in America. A holiday where we celebrate the start of our great nation. Now, I thought it would be a great moment because we've touched on the past episodes on wines to enjoy at a cookout or summertime and things like that. But maybe let's get into a little bit more history of the United States and winemaking. So we're going to start at the very beginning. We're going to go to 1607. English settlers have arrived at Jamestown, Virginia. And guess what they found? Grapes, believe it or not. Wild, native grapes everywhere. We refer to those grapes as Vitis labrusca, Vitis riparia. Names that maybe don't fly off the tongue like a Chardonnay or a Merlot, but they were here in abundance. And the settlers were very hopeful. They thought, well, maybe wine that we've known in Europe can happen here, and we can have a whole new export and start this whole new venture. So 1619, the Virginia House of Burgesses passed a law that every male colonist had to plant at least 10 grapevines. Great plan, but as probably most of us know, it didn't pan out. Why? Because native grapes produced wine that was less than favorable. You'll hear people talk about, even to this day, those kind of species of grapes creating wines that are musky or foxy. These kind of like not the most appetizing sounding descriptors for wine. And so why didn't they just plant European vines, the Vitis vinifera vines? Well, they tried, but they don't work in America. Their climate's not right. There's a lot of pest and disease that we have here that eventually we actually introduced to European wines and created a whole thing. Phylloxera being a big criminal in that whole venture. So nothing's kind of working. And we kind of skip a whole big jump here in history to where we fast forward to the 18th century and missionaries from Spain have started coming over. But they're down in Mexico. And we've talked about this before. And they are planting a grape called the Mission grape. It's a very hardy, low maintenance grape. It was used a lot for sacramental wines, but it thrived in what was Mexico and parts of, back then that was Mexico, that became California, Alta California, San Diego, Sonoma, it's all over. But we're talking late 1700s. There's this other guy that pops up in American wine history around the same time. 1780s, this little guy, Thomas Jefferson. And while he did not invent American wine, he had an idea of what it could be. So especially during his time as a U.S. ambassador to France in the 1780s, he fell in love with European wine. Bordeaux, Burgundy, Champagne, Tokay. He was like drinking it all. He was touring all the vineyards. He was taking notes. He was buying stuff left and right and having it shipped back to his Virginia estate, Monticello, which you can still go visit and see a lot of the footprints that he left. He was obsessed with the idea that America could grow world-class wines. So when he returned home, he got to work, he was experimenting, and pretty much like this is what he did. I mean, he's importing European vines of Vitis vinifera and trying to make them thrive in Virginia. But the sad part about all that, as we know, is he failed at this. And, he brings in people from Europe to try to solve this problem. One of the grapes that we now have in Virginia crossing, the Norton grape, is thanks to him because of the people that he was bringing and trying to influence. So European vines, again, just couldn't survive here in America. Um, and the few times he did get them to grow, the yields, the grapes themselves were just awful, and it didn't amount to anything. But it was crazy because he really never gave up hope. He believed wine could be to our country what beer is to the Germans or whiskey's to the Scots. Those are things he said. He didn't just want wine for the elite. He believed it could be a healthy and moral alternative to hard liquor. He even once wrote, "No nation is drunken where wine is cheap." So it was more than just having a crop and like being obsessed with wine. He was dreaming this as a culture for America. So he's using his political power to promote wine as president. He stocked the White House with French wines, um, really kind of setting the tone for what the president would do. And never drink to excess, but he hosted legendary dinners with wine pairings and philosophy and politics and all that. So it was really interesting to see. Poetic part though, Jefferson never succeeded in making wine himself. After he passed away, though, it finally happened. So he set all the groundwork and got everything going. He never saw the fruits of his labor, but they did eventually come. And even now, today, Virginia is one of the fastest growing wine regions in the United States. It's got over 300 wineries at this point. And Monticello is still seen as the epicenter for Virginia wine. And there's wines that we figured out how to grow now, and climate's obviously changed a lot too. But we're seeing those European grapes that he once wanted, like Viognier, Cabernet Franc, and Petit Verdot, and they're thriving. So it's really interesting to see. So now we're going to jump forward again. Um, Still talking about America as a whole. We're in the 19th century. So in 1833, a man named Jean Louis Vignes, a Frenchman, planted actual Vitis vinifera in Los Angeles and started producing wines that were very similar to what they were drinking in Bordeaux. There's a lot of famous people that come into the wine world. And this John Lewis isn't talked about enough, but he's a crucial part. Gold rush happens though, so everyone starts flooding into Northern California, and the demand for alcohol follows. So grapes were planted throughout Napa and Sonoma. Agustin Harazathi comes into the picture. He was actually a Hungarian nobleman. Um, and in the 1850s, he founded Buena Vista Winery in Sonoma, which is still there to this day. And he's often referred to in textbooks and writings as the father of California viticulture. By late 1800s, California had hundreds and hundreds of wineries. Zinfandel was on the rise. America was set to become a wine powerhouse. But if you go to the end of the 1800s and jump into the 1900s, something happens. Prohibition. When Prohibition hit in 1920, it destroyed everything that America had built thus far in the wine world. So let's set the scene. It's 1919. The 18th Amendment has passed. And by 1920, the Volstead Act makes it illegal to manufacture, sell, or transport alcohol in the United States, period. Wine industry crushed, period. Not just like figuratively, literally, just gone. Before Prohibition, there was more than 2,500 wineries in the U.S. So basically the start of 1900s, before the World Wars, 2,500 wineries. By the time Prohibition had ended in 1933, there was less than 100 wineries still able to operate. It is a kind of unnerving scene. There are still parts of California where you can find wineries that are tied to Prohibition that never were resurrected. Some of them have changed into other industries. Some of them are still farmland. Some of them are, being cultivated in different ways. But we had this just huge impact going, and then it was just gone. Less than 100. And it's just crazy to think out. But, and this is a very big but, prohibition wasn't a total shutdown. There there were loopholes, and as Americans and wine lovers and alcohol lovers, we figured out some loopholes to this. So we got creative, as we do. Religious wines was the first one. So churches, synagogues were allowed to make sacramental wine. So there was a bit of a bump in religious services during this time. It really kind of skyrocketed to the point where some rabbis were producing thousands of gallons, more than what the government would look at and conceive as possibly regular consumption for a congregation. So eyebrows were raised, but this was a loophole. If it was a religious service, you could have your alcohol. The other thing that came into it was home winemaking. Of course, we all know about, you know, the stills in the woods, and people, basically starting NASCAR from running from the cops, and hiding moonshine and all that kind of things going on. But home winemaking, citizens were allowed to make up to 200 gallons of non-intoxicating fruit juice at home. So this thing comes along called the wine brick. So it was dried blocks of grape concentrate. The best part of this is they would come with a warning label on the package. Say, do not add sugar. Do not add sugar and yeast. And definitely do not leave this in a dark cupboard or cool spot for at least 21 days because it will ferment and become alcohol. So they put a warning label on these packages that was really the recipe for fermentation to create wine at home. So you can see just how much ingenuity we had to make sure we're still drinking our wine. So you can kind of see where this is going. Winemaking didn't stop. It just went underground. It became DIY, and there was a cost to this. The quality of wine really plummeted. The focus of American wine drinkers shifted from elegance and aged vintages to what could I just get my hands on? And a lot of times that was high yield grapes that were able to survive shipping and being fermented in basements. And so it wasn't necessarily the big bulk production that we think of today for like low quality. But a lot of times, the best grapes are often the more fragile grapes. So many old European varietals were ripped out because they just couldn't survive, and hybrids were put in place. America starts to lose its wine culture in all of this because it doesn't become a pleasure moment anymore for people. It's become just a fix, and it really hurts all wine buying and wine buying power that we would think of. Generations of just trends that we had seen in the kind of forefathers that came before us, bringing this knowledge of great European wines, but not just the wines, the winemaking techniques, and those were just gone, and so was the consumer's taste. It was just over. So almost when prohibition ended, we were starting over from scratch. Less than 100 wineries. We've turned into nothing but bulk just to get a buzz. It's not necessarily about the quality and the flavor of the wine. It's where does the buzz come from. Took almost 50 years for us to bounce back from this. I've done an episode on this in the past. I will redo one. I want to try to get some of these wines and do it myself, which I think would be really cool. Um, but about 50 years, 1976 happens, the Judgment of Paris, which is a really cool moment. It needs kind of its own episode. There's a movie called Bottle Shock. It's a little cheesy, but it's a great storytelling version of what happens. Basically, California wines. There's a gentleman who is a British man who lives in France who wants to start a wine school. And of course, that's just crazy talk. What would a British guy know about wine, especially in France? And why would anyone go to a British man's wine school in France if he's British? So he's trying to figure out a way to kind of pump up his esteem in the community of French wine. So he decides, I'm going to go to California. Everyone's like sort of whispering. It's not talking, they're little whispers. And I'm going to pick some California wines out and bring them over here, find the same varietals, and we'll have a fun little tasting. And I'll just show the French how good their wines are compared to other wines in the world, and then everyone will praise me. Kind of backfires. The Americans end up winning. So for a bit, he's shunned even more. But what this does is it puts American wine back on the map. And it wasn't a huge coverage story. There was only one journalist there that covered it, and he wasn't even a wine journalist, but it started to gain some traction. And this is the turning point for American winemaking. 1976, the Judgment of Paris. We'll again touch on that more later, and do a deep dive. I would love to get those bottles, but just know America ends up taking the top spot and just kind of shocking the wine world. So I thought, 4th of July coming up, maybe you're traveling, you need a quick little episode, stuck in traffic, whatever. I just wanted to touch on the history of American wine, 30,000 foot view, so you can just enjoy the weekend, grab some wine. I do want to say I appreciate all of you guys for listening and downloading, joining me on my journey, especially Instagram. We do a lot on there. We've been doing a lot of blind tastings. I just finished my advanced course through the Court of Master Sommelier, so we'll be taking that exam in February, getting ready for that. So you'll see a lot more wine content over on the Instagram. And just won best wine tastings in the state of South Carolina. So everyone that voted, thank you again. I appreciate that. That was a crazy accomplishment, and very thankful. But I hope you guys really enjoy this weekend. Enjoy your holiday. Be safe out there. Have fun. Next time you open a bottle of American wine, California, Virginia, Oregon, New York, something funky from the East Coast, that traditional Napa cab, just remember what you're tasting. It's a long story. It's a winding story. It's difficulty. It's the underdog. It's overcoming. It's persistence. It's the American dream is what you're drinking every time you open a bottle of American wine. So thank you for tuning in. I hope you had fun. Maybe you learned something, but the most important thing is we got to drink some wine. Until next time, bye-bye.